Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behavior Business Roundtable, episode 4. We are here. I'm in my new digs. I think this is permanent digs, so I won't be outside with the chickens anymore, and I won't be
Until the
standing
kids
in
are home.
rain. No, we're good. We're good. We got it. I'm closed off from the rest of the world down here, so it's just me and my Dungeons and Dragons. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Yeah.
Do I
Tired.
need to introduce you? It's like number 4. I feel like I don't need to introduce you guys anymore.
No,
but maybe.
What are we paying you for? Introduce
Well,
us.
I'll introduce you. I'll be with the nicest one of you so far, and that's Taylor. Hey, Taylor, how's it going?
Hey, Kyle. How are you? My name is Taylor Barker. I'm the owner and clinical director of Ebb and Flow ABA Therapy in Flint, Michigan.
How's your summer going, Taylor?
It's great. Nice and warm, coaching baseball. It's fun.
Yeah, you said that. This is Little League, or is this?
Yeah, Little League. Yeah, Little League, Rec League. Yeah, so none of that travel nonsense, none of that
Good.
ultra competitive stuff. We're just having fun.
Good. That's where I like it. I'll be with the second nicest. Kristen, how's it going? And that's not. It makes it sound like you're being mean. You aren't being mean. You're fine.
Sam, like, what did I do today? I've been on mute most of the time because I'm getting
just
a new
mostly
roof.
making sure Steve goes last.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fair. As long as me and Taylor are tied for first.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm Dr. Kristen Byra. I'm the CEO and founder of Upskill ABA, and it is very roasty here in Arizona. We're going to get to 101, I think, today. So.
Oh wow! I was about to
Yeah.
ask how roasty is roasty, but that's a lot. And you're getting some construction done there. It sounds like.
Yes, before monsoon season comes, which is really important. So for the desert, we do get like torrential downpours for like 30 minutes, and then your house and your yard don't know what to do with that amount of rain in that short amount of time. So we're getting a new roof.
Perfect. Well, thank you to editing and post to take out all the air compressors and men yelling at each other on the roof. So that's good. And finally, Steven, how are you doing, bud?
I was doing pretty well until this morning. I found out that our nice big presentation for the Michigan Science Center is falling on me because Kyle's too cool to actually drive up and participate like he was going to. So
I know. I'm really sorry about that. Mine was it was an intro to ABA. It's you've got this elevator pitch like in the back of your pocket.
Sure.
You're fine.
You know I wanted to hear myself talk anyway. So I am actually very happy that I have to do it. So it's fine.
I know. I actually feel worse for the crowd than.
It's a science center. It's
Me
time to nerd out.
Yes. What was that, Taylor? You skipped for a second.
Oh no, I was just saying me too. I feel
yeah.
worse for the crowd. Yeah, than if you would have done a crowd.
Oh man. Well, I thought I'd have a little bit of fun with this, so we'll see where this goes. But I wanted to talk current issues in ABA from your expertise and experience as business owners, but from a lens that incorporated the philosophical underpinnings of science. So, Steve, fair warning, we can keep these answers to a minute, bud. Okay. As I know this is
just let them know when you cut me off that it was your fault, not that I just randomly had a stroke or something. All right.
Fair. Yes, I will be utilizing the mute button if I need to today. But I'm from Indiana, so this feels really like I've got to be polite, and so this feels really out of character for me to mute anybody for going too long. But I'm gonna try it, and I'm gonna say sorry a lot. I think if I do it. Did anybody have good devices for remembering the philosophical underpinnings of science for their BCBA exam? This is going back. Or did you just flat out remember it?
No.
No,
Yeah,
I always did.
Flat out remembered it. Yeah.
Flat out remembered. Kristen, did you have one?
I mean, we had to do all of our, those flashcards, like not multiple choice, like definition, and you're off by a word, then you were going to get dinged off on your quiz.
Gotcha. I always use the acronym of DEER PP, DEER-PP. That was what I did, and that's the order that these are in that order. Is that common? I don't know if it's common.
No, I think that's just you.
I feel like it should be common. I feel like that that needs to be its own meme. I think maybe on some of the study books.
You can pass the big exam with Kyle's kind of funny metonymical devices here.
Yeah, I'm going to be completely honest and get a lot of hate for this, but before even taking the exam, I didn't realize the emphasis was there on the 7 dimensions the way it is, and I just read it a couple times. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, did not take the time to memorize or really pay attention that closely.
Oh, on the 7 dimensions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The underpinnings of our, applied.
Because they're
work.
different, Steve. Don't get them confused.
I was gonna
You
say, I'm
getting
like,
them
because that's not
confused?
deer pee-pee. Those are different.
Either way. I didn't
What'd
memorize
you-
any of it. I learned what it was for all of it is what I'm getting at.
See, some people use the back cage acronym for those. I feel like that's more common. Is that common? Or are you guys just pros? You guys just got it down.
I feel like
I think got it
Taylor's
past
like-
tense, had it past
Yeah,
tense, right?
like-
I don't want to have to do like a pop quiz right now.
Right.
we were forced to know these so well that I didn't even think of them as anything other than just like what we learned, like what we did. I guess that's the bigger point.
No, that makes sense. Well, and that's why you're on this panel. That's why you guys.
Is it?
I'm being nice now. Yeah. I'm ready to get started. You guys want to get started?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the first one, I want to start with determinism. So the world is a lawful and orderly place. Nothing's random. If we assume the world is lawful and orderly, behavior is not random. What does this tell us about ABA quality concerns, things like turnover rates and ethics concerns? And I don't know, who wants to go first? Kristen, you want to go first this time? Then you pick. You get to pick.
Let's see. I feel like I want Steve to go first because I feel like I'm unfortunately going to agree with him in this one.
Go, Steve.
I'd say it is still shocking to me that as behavior analysts, we don't think about things more in terms of determinism and the fact that we still act like we're out here with free will, doing things a certain way because we want to or because it makes sense to us rather than it being how our behavior has been shaped. And so if you really take the time to break all of these things down, all of the issues in our field, and because I have a minute, I'm not going to go through them individually, but it's all coming down to competing contingencies and our ideals versus, generalized reinforcement, both in the form of money and control. And so don't have enough time to talk about it here, but I think control functions the same way as money does as a generalized reinforcer. And it's why we see bosses becoming more authoritarian over time compared to when they usually first start a company. Why we see the ultra wealthy kind of shift their views of the world away from what those ideals were in the beginning and towards something more along the lines of maintaining their current reinforcement. And so I would say anybody that's moving into a leadership role, write down your ideals and then monitor that over time and see how they shift. And be honest with yourself and like realize this is happening because of the reinforcement I've encountered, not necessarily because things have changed around me or the world has changed around me.
Kristen, do you find yourself agreeing?
Yeah, I was ready for Steve just to say the rat is never wrong. Like that's what I thought his opening line was going to be, which like I do agree with them and I am guilty of sometimes straying away from that because there are lots of competing contingencies. I full agree. I think sometimes I wish some of the contingencies were stronger than others.
Using up some of Steve's extra time there. Taylor?
Yes.
Yeah, I think to bring it back to the question, I think it's right now currently that just says that the naturally occurring contingencies are controlling what you had said, the quality concerns, the turnover rates, the ethics concerns. And I think the difficult part is that then if you were to shift maybe some of those contingencies over to organizational contingencies and say the organization is operating under those naturally occurring contingencies as well, I think that's leading into it too. And so to not like jump right off from our argument at the end of the last podcast, but I think we got to make a change somewhere. Those naturally occurring contingencies have to be adjusted. They have to be changed. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on getting what we're getting. And it's going to be those rare outliers of what I could only say is the individual people, that sole practitioner, that tiny little mom and pop shop that's going to be trying to dig at it, trying to toss those pebbles. And it's not really going to make any sort of significant change or difference unless we change the global or organizational naturally occurring contingencies.
And what do you, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, I think we also just need to recognize first that not everybody comes in with the same ideals. You know what I mean? Not everybody has the same reinforcers of helping people and trying to make a living while you do it. But, there is just those societal reinforcers, for the most part. And I also think about how small our field is when I first started, and you were going to be shut down if you were doing shitty things. You know what I mean? It was like not someone's not going to come in, but everybody else was going to hate on you. Maybe the BACB was going to come down on you, and it was not going to be like work well for you if anybody found out you weren't doing things the right way. And I almost think, and it's probably not going to be a popular view, but we need more of that back. We need more, guidelines for ethical practice, but not just our ethics code, but actual, practice as a whole for the companies, employee, the BCBAs, and the BCBAs in general. And as much as people hate giving up control, I think if we don't do this ourselves, now you're going to see others coming in, like the insurance companies are doing, and trying to control it in ways that we may not agree with. And so we need something in place to control behavior, because otherwise we're just going to chase reinforcers like everybody else.
Kristen?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, let Steve borrow my devil horns and put them on too. Because I know then folks hear regulations, they start freaking out, right? I think part of the problem is, though, that we have two very different regulatory bodies monitoring behavior. So if you are a clinician-owned agency and you're in a licensure state, or if you're not, you're still beholden to the BACB, because Taylor, you're a business owner and a BCBA, right? So if you do really shitty things, as Steve said, then like the BACB can come right down on you. If you're in a licensure state, then licensing board. But if you are a non-BCBA owned company, then and you do, poor behavior, you're not beholden to the BACB or the licensing board, right? And so then it's a matter of, do we alert a funder, and then where do their hands kind of land? And of like, do we really want to pursue this with a full audit of your clinic? Because that is time and money, right? So I think it's difficult when we operate in silos in terms of who has jurisdiction over poor clinical practice, because it's not just one unified regulatory body.
Yeah, I don't need the devil horns because mine just never come off. But I think also just generally the BACB has taken this very global approach. This is how everybody else does it. We're going to be a little more legitimate by doing it this way. And now we're not actually making sure anything's going the way it is, unless there's a complaint, and then we'll err on the side of not getting sued most of the time more than anything else. And so it may just be a third party. It might be some sort of accreditation or something like that, where people just know you're only legitimate if you have that. I don't even know what the answer would be for this, but I do know if we're not policing ourselves, then somebody else is going to do it. And it's not going to be pretty if we don't have control over our own science anymore.
Taylor, did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Steve had said, that I absolutely felt that way coming out of grad school, almost 15, 20 years ago, that, yeah, oh my goodness, I don't want to mess up. I don't want Kristen, who I forget where you lived at the time, to see that the company I'm working for is posting client testimonials on my website. Like, no way am I going to work for a place like that. And I really think I'm now jaded in that sense. Like, it doesn't even bump my needle when I see a website that's got the client testimonials and the Facebook posts where the parents just gave every staff member a $200 gift card to blank and blank. And it's like, whether or not we agree with the ethics code, right? It's still the ethics code. And when I see organizations and things like that, it truly doesn't even bump my needle anymore. Like, I remember like fresh out of grad school wanting to like, we got to take this to the board and we got to, and now it's not there. And I think I don't know if we're talking about solutions, I think the behavior analysts who are BCBAs, and this would be my pie in the sky. If I were in, Jim Carr's position or Brianne Heller's position, I would say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hold the BCBAs accountable to their employer's actions. And so if you're working for an employer or an organization, if the organization's in violation of our ethics code, so are you. So I think that would be my solution.
Oh, Steve, I thought you were going to say something.
I am. And I'm trying to think of the way that I'm trying not to jump too far into politics, but it always tends to get that way. I think people need to look at the freedom in terms of what is truly more free. You know what I mean? Are you more free because there's laws in place keeping you safe from others, or are you more free when you're out there and you might be killed tomorrow, but at least no one's telling you what to do, you know? And finding that middle ground, that common ground where we are all safe, we're doing the right things, we are protecting ourselves from those other reinforcers, while in the meantime not having people unnecessarily just, hold our hands and force us to do things. You have to find the right way to do that, but to me, I think that would go much farther than just letting people have it be the Wild West, you know?
Let's move on to empiricism, the E in my Dear PP acronym. This is the first E, at least. Empiricism. So what decisions in the industry are being made in spite of the evidence? Or conversely, what decisions do you think are being made based on insufficient or a lack of evidence? And Taylor, you want to start this one out?
Yeah, I think people are going to probably get sick of this particular soapbox of mine, but I think
do it. Grand
yeah, I think. Well, yeah, I need to order some of Kristen's little devil horns so I can have them here. Yeah, so just toss them to me and we'll TikTok snap them up my head.
I think you need some rhinestones in yours.
Yeah, but I would say like the organizational arrangement of clinical application of our services, and my particular top soapbox is in-home versus clinical services or center-based services, and where I see these organizations designing and setting up exclusive in-home services, but then not making any sort of empirical or medical necessity analysis on is in-home services more appropriate. And I'll constantly keep bringing up this paper published by Card where they had compared clinic-based versus home-based across the same participants, and the kids that were in the clinic made a 100% increase in the speed and rate of acquisition of skills. And so for me, if we're saying, look, the evidence is there that says clinic-based services are more appropriate for this subset of kids, yet organizations are still just designing these services from my perspective, and I'm going over my time, so I'll try to speed it up, but from my perspective to just increase revenue, right? Because then you don't have to pay for a building, you don't have to pay rent, you don't have to pay taxes, you don't have to pay for furnace repairs, you don't have to pay for printers. So you're making more money at the expense of the kids and the clinical outcomes, in spite of the evidence to the contrary.
It's more of an optics move at that point. Kristen, what do you think?
I'm not going to rebuttal Taylor because I don't want to take up all of my time rebuttaling him, but I will later. People are not going to like this one either, but I
just leave him on.
Know that I think this probably just going to be this episode. I just leave him on. Boy, so I think Taylor's going to jump on this one too, because I know we talk about a lot, is telehealth. Like folks are just automatically going to remote services when we are either not even doing any kind of analysis to say, is this most appropriate for this case? Again, not to say there are not outliers. There are not some areas where this makes more sense. But when you are in downtown metro areas like Phoenix and you are doing remote services, get out of here.
Steve?
Yeah, I'll argue with Taylor in a minute as well. But and then obviously I agree with the telehealth. You can even go back to our original models here and how long it's been. We've been doing the same discrete trial training, and there's other models that are out there, but we haven't, tested them. But we've already talked about that some. I think generally practitioners reading research, seeing what it is, and implementing it without understanding the why or the when or how it works. And I'll get back to the number of people that I see using a token economy just because that's what you do, and not knowing the nuances of the science behind it and when it's usable and when it's contraindicated, when it's actually helpful, or when you're just wasting your time. I think generally people in our field are taking the research and using it rather than taking the time to really understand it and applying it the way it makes the most sense.
A few different areas we're going down there, but yeah, let's who wants to jump on Taylor first?
Let's take Taylor. Kristen, you can go first.
Okay.
Kristen's excited.
I am, because I really love Taylor, but I don't agree with him wholeheartedly on this. So I will say I absolutely agree that as more people are moving into our space, it's way cheaper, right? I'm not gonna argue with the fact there's definitely folks who are just opening in home because it's way cheaper. You don't do overhead and things like that. You can also have crazy long session hours because we're there till 8 p.m. and parents great, thanks for the babysitter. I do disagree, and I do disagree with that practice. I agree with Taylor that it's a problem. However, I have seen being someone who has done in-home service provision, like this is, fresh out of grad school. They're not centers everywhere because it just wasn't our model. I will say my ability to do caregiver guidance was so much more effective being in home with the families than I've been able to replicate having a center B service, because I can absolutely see in the moment, oh, this is why mom is losing her mind today. We have not set up good contingencies that when we leave to have her be successful, no one's sleeping. And I know that because mom is asking if it's cool if she goes lays down for a hot minute. And then I see that we have 8 beds all smushed together because they're trying to co-sleep and keep a kid quiet. You don't get that kind of intel when they're doing the drive-by in the parking lot, tuck and roll into the clinic. And I see clinicians doing, at handoff, they're billing that for a 15-minute, family guidance session because they talked about the kid's day in the clinic for a hot minute. That's not family guidance, and people can continue to lie to themselves about it. But that's not it. So I will say there are, I think, some really huge benefits from having that home insight that folks are not ever experiencing in the clinic. And I also think there's a lack of empathy on the RBT's side and the BCBA side when they don't see what home is like, and they see that, the kid rolls up and in his lunchbox, he has 5 fruit roll-ups and a chocolate milk. And they're like, why didn't mom pack him at lunch? It's because mom was up since 3 a.m. this morning and wasn't able to go to the grocery store. And this is what they had in their house. And I think, lose those insights when it's just the tuck and roll. And I'm going to call it the tuck and roll at a lot of clinics because that's the happening. Yeah. Tuck and roll.
Well, and I would say I don't disagree with you, Kristen, but I think maybe we need to either separate or delineate the roles of what would be 97153, so just adaptive behavior treatment, versus what you're describing seems more like the parent training portion of it, right? So the caregiver training and saying, hey, we may do 20, 30 hours in the clinic, but what might also be clinically appropriate and medically necessary is to then go home for 2 or 3 hours a week. But where my biggest rub is when that technician is in the home for 20, 30 hours a week and they see their BCBA 1 or 2 hours a week. And that's where I'm saying the clinical outcomes are much greater in a clinic for the 97153. But I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said with respect to the parent training, the parent outcomes, being able to more appropriately assess and identify those clinical concerns.
Yeah. And I do the 5-3 though, and sorry, Kyle, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I do think though there needs to be some, risk assessment done of, is it appropriate for this client to come into a clinic? Especially if you are primarily serving the 6 and under crowd. No, we're not going to have the 12-year-old with severe aggression come in, right? It's just not now we have learner safety. So I do think there are cases where home-based services is more appropriate, even at the 5-3 level. And I don't like I never am a big fan of the all or nothing, always this and never that kind of breakdown. But I do, to your point, I agree that most agencies that are in home are not operating underneath that. They're operating under this is cheap and convenient way for me to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes back to the previous question about determinisms and saying, if we have these naturally occurring contingencies and I can do this cheaper, I'm going to do it 100%. As opposed to saying, again, and this maybe ties into some of the other questions that we're going to run into, but should we be making clinical evaluations to say, yep, 12-year-old severe problem behavior that specifically targets little kids, not appropriate for clinic-based. And because of all the other ancillary symptoms, home-based is 100% appropriate. But I think, like you just said, the all or nothing. Nope, we're just going to have every single kid that calls up or submits a inquiry on our website, home-based. That's my rub.
I think it does tie into
Yeah.
I think it does tie into the determinism question, though. And don't make me mute you, Steve. I think it does tie into determinism, though, because it points to that fact. Maybe I'll back up Taylor a little bit on this, is that there are decisions being made in which the variable controlling the behavior of the clinician or the organization is not necessarily where is most clinically appropriate. It's like, can we get this person in? And there might even be good intentions in that, like, well, they can only do in-home, or they can only do this setting, like, at least we'll be helping as opposed to none. But there's also the, like, well, at least we'll have another customer on our roll too. Like, there are two different variables there too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't want to sound like an old curmudgeon, but I do see those situations where, you talk about this or you comment, because of course this is my soapbox, and you're on social media or you're Reddit or something, and those clinicians, they wholeheartedly believe that they are doing what is best for that kid. So I'm not trying to discount that at all, but I think to your point, Kyle, yeah, those naturally occurring contingencies, and organizationally those determinations are being made because maybe those competing contingencies, one trumps the other.
I'd say, I think generally it's just too much of a hard line for me more than anything, because there are going to be a lot of situations where a family can't get their child in, but they still need those services. A lot of other barriers to success in a lot of situations. And I know you're not arguing against those scenarios, but having that broad view of this being an issue, I think kind of discounts those in a certain way. I'll also add, though, there are still wait lists all over the place. There's still people waiting for services. And so if you're starting a new clinic, you don't have the money for the upstart. You're just going to go out there and work with someone on your own, build up a caseload, build from there. It's still better than them not getting services at all. And there's still plenty of evidence that shows this is very successful, just maybe not as successful. And so I think the real issue becomes, once you've grown to the point now where you can afford to do more, where you can build an in-center system where quality can be even higher, that instead you're taking the cash and running rather than making that shift for higher quality services.
Kristen?
Yeah, I don't think location just automatically assumes quality, right? I mean, I have seen kids be in center-based services for 4 years and have made zero gains, versus I've seen really successful in-home programming. But again, like, are we setting up designated areas so we can have, lots of learning opportunities? Are siblings being minded by another caregiver, as opposed to RBT trying to be like, hey, I'm not here for you, I'm here for your sibling? I definitely can see things go sideways in home when we don't have good boundaries and we don't have good systems. But I see things go awful in a clinic as well. So I don't think we can say location alone is going to automatically improve services, improve outcomes.
Yeah,
just because
absolutely. And I
have access to the BCBA down the hall because I'm in the clinic, right? Like, does it mean that even if you see me once a week that you're doing a good job supervising me, right? So I do want to be careful. Like, I think there is a lot of conditional variables that are going to make or break your program.
Yeah, and I think maybe just
you're talking all things being equal, right? Like, you keep referencing the card study, which I need to pull that up again because I have read that one. But like, we're assuming all things being equal, and I think unfortunately our field is like, the spectrum is longer than my arms can reach in terms of what that delivery looks like. Like, I just don't want parents to be thinking like, oh, I better go in clinic or my service is going to be crap. You may go to a clinic and it's going to be way worse than if you had someone come into your home. But you may have someone come into your home and it's also really terrible, which really saddens me, but is also true.
Yeah. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I think just tying it back to the original question of empiricism, I think that, obviously that's my soapbox, but I think making sure that organizationally or even independently that we're looking at those data or the evidence to say, or even the clinical appropriateness, medical necessity evaluations, and saying, okay, what is actually most appropriate? What's going to get there? I think our field has a long way to go.
I'm not aware of any, are there any assessment tools or clinical tools that point to more appropriate settings, or like what might be empirically the most appropriate setting? I don't think there is there?
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything.
Not available on the market. No, I mean, I've seen clinics develop their own. If ASIABA approves my talk with Ryan Jones, then that's what we hope to present on, is looking at risk assessment of service, because I think there's a huge dearth in our field as to how to go about assessing that. So again, I don't think people are always acting nefariously. I think sometimes it really is just a lack of not knowing of, again, what is the consideration of like the risk of a 12-year-old with, peer aggression coming to this clinic right now. I don't think business owners who are not BCBAs are thinking about it. And then those who are, like, have we thought enough? I just don't think we have great supports in our field to do that.
And It just gets into people working outside their area of competency because that's where the money is as well.
All right, let's talk experimentation now. The second E. I thought you guys might like this one, but maybe, I don't know. We'll see. If you could oversee some sort of large-scale experiment of the entire industry using any sort of analysis you'd like, so if you're going to use a reversal design, multiple baseline design, use statistical analysis, functional behavior assessment, whatever you'd want to do, what would you do? And Kristen, I think you're first.
Great. So I'm trying to do one right now. So I love that.
Perfect. There's a plug.
There is a plug. I am working with United Health Hospital in Utah, and we are trying to get our field to come to at least a basic level of agreement of what does quality look like in service delivery. And so it is a survey, which are not ideal, but to start with, as a field, can we at least come to an agreement of this is what we think a metric of quality is, and then do you actually engage in it yourself? That's what we are attempting to scratch the surface on right now. It's obviously self-report and people can lie. But in terms of do you think it's a measure of quality or not? Like that is an opinion based. And so I see every other day on LinkedIn posts about quality and that we're not doing it and no one agrees. So we are attempting to at least start with some level of agreement.
I think the acknowledgement that the survey base can be lied upon is different than most of the psychological community. So that's good for you, Kristen. Who's next? Steve? I think Steve's next.
Sure. I'll take over. No. I think that's real cool. It definitely is needed. I wish I could do a multi-element across different, counterbalancing different behaviors, different interventions, that sort of thing, and really see, we have all this data of what works, and we have, these studies that show these different techniques work, but very little comparing one to the other, which is more effective. What are the contraindications or indications based on the clientele, the age, the time? Kind of like to tie it in, we have all this data in our work for all of COVID. What are the effects on problem behavior in COVID? But we'd want to, look at it in terms of diagnoses. We want to look at it in terms of medications. We want to look at it in terms of target behavior, age, the ability to access the community versus not. Those are all going to develop this whole picture. And so if you do that same sort of thing about in an autism type setting, what interventions based on the age range and really had this data so we knew what the highest quality is, not just what quality is, because we're not even there at this point. But I think that would be really cool to set that up and to see what we find from that.
Taylor, round us out.
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump on something Kristen had already said, because she and I, we've been messaging for years about this, but I think evaluating the clinical outcomes related to remote supervision. And when I mean remote supervision, 97155. So I think we currently have publications related to supervision of the RBT or supervision of BCBAs accruing their hours, but there really isn't a wide set evaluation of competency or clinical outcomes, or even the ability to analyze clinically and produce the meaningful outcomes associated with supervision. So 97155, doing it remotely via telehealth. And I think for me, that's probably my number one soapbox right now.
Rebuttals, follow-ups. What do y'all think? Go ahead, Kristen.
For Steve, like looking at all those variables, like I think a lot of that data exists, and I just wish that some of the company, like these massive companies that have 200 BCBAs, 300 BCBAs, and thousands of clients, like there is so much aggregate data that's just not made publicly, in a transparent fashion. And I do wish that folks would be a little bit more willing to allow us to start developing some standardized data sets like we have in other fields like physical therapy and occupational therapy. And I mean, you should be able to, you can look up like what's the average, treatment sessions post hip replacement in a 60-year-old man of average health, right? Mm-hmm. Like we have real data to say it should take X number of sessions of physical therapy if they, come to every session and things like that. I do think that we have data to start looking at that, but no one wants to share that transparently.
I have some concern about whether we really have that data, whether it's really collected in the most effective, efficient manner, and Or is it just we're checking the box because that's what we do as behavior analysts? But you'd think at least on a meta scale, you should have this idea that, all right, it may not be perfect data, but it should be consistently imperfect. And on average, you can see this information and it would be helpful. But I think we've also talked into the contingencies might be, all right, this says, 10 hours a week is good enough, but that hurts my bottom line. So I don't even want to share that data with you now.
Well, and that
I
plays
think
into
there's
the quality question. Oh, I'm just saying that plays into the quality question too, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly going to be ones that skew the data, right? In terms of like, they're just doing poor care. So of course, none of the kids have good outcomes, right? But I'd be hoping we could at least get some generalized statements, Steve, around if it's autism and these other comorbid conditions, we're going to see this kind of impact. If they're autism and they're on this medication, or they started, they didn't start till they were 6 versus 2, like, what could we expect trajectory to look like under ideal conditions, knowing that everyone's not going to have ideal conditions, but at least have some framework as opposed to like, I feel like now, again, you asked about frameworks for risk assessments. Still looking at, how people are determining intensity of services. There's not fantastic, readily available, tools to be able to do that. And I think if we had some of that more aggregate data, we could at least have some parameters, some guidelines, some guardrails to operate under if folks would be more forthcoming with those data sets.
Sure.
Yeah, I think though, or at least I worry, and it's not that I don't support that, because I agree 100%, Steve and Kristen, but I think I worry about the potential slippery slope of the spectrum of, if we're talking about autism, or I know, Steve, you don't work necessarily in the autism space, EIBI, but if we're looking at making those evaluations, those comparisons, presenting those data and saying, well, I've got what a profile of a typically best outcomes learner would be. We're making rapid progress versus without even any comorbidities or any sort of other significant impacts, but we're looking at a level 3 kid and we're saying, no, it's taking hours or hundreds of trials to learn this skill. I worry how regulators, funders are going to take that information or take those data, because, to pick on Kristen's example, yeah, the 60-year-old man with hip replacement, that's generally accepted across all healthy populations of humans to fall within, 12 sessions, 15 sessions, whatever. But I think the variety with, at least in the autism space, it could be potentially dangerous to us as a field, as an industry, and could pigeonhole us to having things like, nope, you only get 20 hours a week, or nope, you only get 15 exposures to this learning opportunity, and if you can't show you're doing it, you're not getting funding anymore. So that's always my worry, at least with those types of data sets.
Go ahead, Kristen.
I hear your concern, and my rebuttal to that would be, like, we would hopefully have that kind of profile identified, right? Like, level 3, didn't start services right away. Like, maybe we weren't able to get access to care. We would know that their trajectory is going to look different, but we'd at least have that type of trajectory to then look at and see how far off are we kind of in line with what we've seen other kids with similar profiles. Not the high, like not the super fast, trial acquisitioners, but looking at the profile. If you look at it, I'm comparing it to education. And if you take, in general, by the end of, kindergarten, you should be able to identify 100, sight words and stuff like that. How far off from that are we doing? Because when we start writing IEP goals, we start trying to match them to grade level standards, right? I just don't think we have great tools like that. No one, if you look at speech language pathology, if you look at PTOT, they'll even do like goal attainment scaling. So like, we think in 6 months we'll hit this level, and then anything above that is like a +1 or a +2. But if it's below that, I'm now like a -1 or a -2. Like, how far off that? I feel like when we write goals, it's like you did it or you didn't, and like that's it, and we just move on to the next. I just think there just needs to be a lot more thought around what progress are we making, where do we think we are going to be, and if we're like not there, how are we adjusting and adjudicating that, versus like, oh well, they have autism, so like, just didn't go very well, we'll try better next time. I feel like that's usually what's being said, as opposed to, hey, look, this is where we thought based on these factors and this analysis, here's how we're going to fix it, to get them back. Or like, hey, this is actually where we thought they would be. What would be a stretch goal? Like, right? Like, what can we do to try and make a little bit better? Or if they're only slightly below it, like, what can we do to like bump them up? I don't see that kind of analyses happening. I see like pass, fail, hopefully better next time.
And I think part of the idea is not looking this in terms of the current structure of services, the current system, but how can you create a better system once you have this data? And so I think that's part of the argument is we wouldn't want it to be, all right, now we're just saying, oh, the outliers are losing out. You have that bell curve. Now we have to have a new approach to discuss and treat, and how do we even conceptualize these outliers who aren't fitting in this picture?
Yeah,
so I'll make this rebuttal really, really quick, but if we tie this back to the D in the deer example, the deer people, and look at determinism.
Keep that alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm seeing examples where, again, those naturally occurring contingencies by the insurance funders, by the payers, where they are then cherry picking these certain examples and applying it universally. Like we have a smaller funder here in Michigan. And I can't quote the article they picked, but it was like some 1987 paper that said, look, these kids with autism found success at 30 hours a week. So we're capping it at 30, irregardless of symptomatology, diagnoses, whatever. And that's still, again, always my caution, always my worry. Because I think, Kristen, if we had everything that you're describing, easy on our end. But I always worry about kind of where I see the funders kind of cherry pick or not apply that as intended.
Yeah, but conversely,
I'll put it off
making it up
in sections.
Yeah, so conversely though, they're just making it up as they go because they found one paper. Whether like if we actually had all this data, now we could really fight them on those things better.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
It comes down to us communicating our results and quality in a meaningful way to them too. Because if they're not interpreting what we're saying in our reports the right way, then yeah, they can also create a problem. Ready to move on to replication?
Yeah, let's get going. I got ribs that I need to go wrap on the smoker here soon. So
well, that's of utmost concern for me right now. Replication. Kristen, this might be up your alley. Can high quality organizational cultures be replicated across businesses, states, etc., or are they dependent on just exceptional individual leaders kind of running the show there? And I forget who's first. Kristen, do you want to go? No, you went first last time, didn't you? I think Taylor's first this time.
Well, I think Steve's first. He hasn't gone first yet, but I'm good to kick him to the curb on this. I think I'll jump into it and I'll use 30 of my 60 seconds. I think they're one and the same. I do think in order to have good organizational culture, you need to have exceptional leaders, and I think you need to have leaders that have, again, kind of some of those experiences that we've talked about to make sure that we're on the up and up with ethics, up and up on clinical quality, evaluating outcomes. And I think if it's the case that you're able to find enough of those people, you can replicate to that degree. But I think it becomes very, very difficult. And I don't remember if it was 1 or 2 podcasts ago, Steve talking about this too, that it becomes difficult to scale these things. So I think if you find the right people and you have the right intentions from the top all the way down, from the CEO, the owners, all the way down, I think it's replicable, but I think it's a challenge.
Steve, go ahead.
First of all, how dare you?
You can
Second of all, I think this can go back to what I was talking about, the determinism as well. Why are we blaming the rat? Why are we giving the rat credit? What is an exceptional leader? We're talking about the contingencies. We're talking about how their behavior has been shaped and how it fits into the cultural norms around it. And so if we change the cultural norms, if we put things in place, controls, we cancel people who are just trying to make money rather than trying to help people, or whatever it is that the culture needs to do to actually allow this to occur, then it's not about the individual. It's about what are the contingencies in place. And so however we go about doing it, I don't think it's about individuals as much as why they're doing what they're doing. Is it they think it's more logical? Is it because of the money? Or is it because, hey, this helps more people?
Kristen?
Here I am agreeing with Steve again. Goodness.
Man, just put the devil horns on.
I think you could have someone who is an exceptional behavior analyst who has those values of wanting to do well, serve everyone, and money is the least of their concern. But if you put in an organization that doesn't support that, then they're bound to fail, because they won't be able to do the things that they believe to be good behavior analytic practice or quality service if they're in a system that doesn't support them. So I think you need to have both. You need to have folks who have that value alignment, but then also be placed in an organization that's going to allow them to live those values.
That goes back to, I think, a podcast ago where we talked about, like, are we producing behavior analysts that come out of these grad programs with those values inherently instilled within them, and to speak non-behaviorally, but is that an issue too, where maybe we're not training to the values of quality as opposed to training to the logistics of having a successful business? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think it's, are the old hippie folks that were controlling our programs in the 60s and 70s still there instilling these in with us or not, The
grassroots and the,
yeah.
Well, I think I said it last time, like, I also think we all have shared experiences. Like, we were in a practicum where we saw progress right in front of our eyes, like, very rapidly, right? Kid who started with, zero verbal skills, who then is talking, kids with severe behavior are not seen anymore. They're going back to their regular school district and, like, leaving our program. Like, we all encountered that, and not like a one-off thing. It was consistent, right? And so I'm also concerned too that folks just have habituated to, like, this is what progress should look like, because they don't know differently, because then their supervisor hasn't experienced anything differently. I think that's part of the issue also.
Selection at play. Any other follow-up on replication? Here, we repeated, no issues there. We'll go on to parsimony, the first P. Simplest answers, often the right answer, worth ruling out first, Occam's razor. What do you think might be the simplest explanation for any of the major challenges our field is facing today? Whoever wants to go first.
This time?
I've lost.
Do I actually get to I mean, I went first the very first time around, and then you just left me out the rest. So.
I don't know. I was interrupted. Of course.
I'll say, I think the simplest explanation of what we're seeing is we've tried to take our science in our field and plug it into what the healthcare system generally is, which is a money-making machine, at least in the United States. And it is industry rather than it is helping people. And our science started off as helping people. We've been plugged into this system. And instead of fighting the system, fighting the good fight, which I know it may not even be possible to do, but we can at least do our best to try. We just acclimated ourselves into it, and things fell by the wayside. And so that's what I see this as. We've allowed the rest of the system to corrupt us instead of us trying to corrupt it in the positive way.
Kristen? I don't know why I'm so off on the order.
That's okay. Yeah, I think it is round peg, square hole. Like, we are trying to operate under contingencies that are not best suited to how we would like to practice as behavior analysts.
Go ahead, Taylor. Get some extra time.
Okay, good. Well, I'll start out saying I disagree with you both, but I'll wait for my rebuttal time. I think it's graduate training experiences and the degree of education, and kind of like the last comment Kristen and Steve were talking about, those practicum experiences. I think we're seeing copies of people that don't know what good clinical outcomes are, that just took the practice exams 50, 60, 70 times until they could pass the exam, and then are just going through the motions of their organization. And then funding. We don't need to get out another argument at the end of the podcast like Kristen and I did last time about funding, but I think we had more funding, or funding stayed commensurate to what it was 15 years ago, kind of per capita of child diagnosed. I think we'd be in a much better place.
Taylor, I will say I kind of disagreed with you at the last episode until you explained the cost of living, the analogies and things like that. I'm like, I think I'm a little more Team Taylor than I thought I was on that argument. But I don't know. Rebuttals, go ahead. I'm not on the panel. You guys.
With the cost of living, I'll just say that then we can get into the actual argument Taylor wants to have. But I think that again needs to be potentially a bigger governmental system of, all right, the minimum wage just increases with inflation and with the cost of living. That way, everybody grows with it, and it's just one continuous process rather than it being, oh, no, this one area isn't getting funding or this other area isn't getting funding and arguing about where's my piece of the pie. It just needs to be a social kind of work together to make this work for everybody.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
All right,
Well, you're getting
Taylor,
off
what's
topic.
your argument?
Go ahead.
What's your argument?
So I guess my argument is I think we need to, or it's most appropriate for us to align with the medical model. And I think I don't know if this is a prime example because I've only had like a minute and a half to think about it, but one of the greatest teaching colleges for medicine is in our home state, Steve, University of Michigan Medicine. And I see that as a perfect example of where we're able to align with or say, hey, this hospital is creating great practitioners and great surgeons, great doctors, and then sending them out into the world. But it's also a money-making organization because it has to stay solvent. And so I think what is likely problematic is not necessarily that we have too many people that don't understand the medical field or are way off in right field, those grassroots, we're just going to keep it to ourselves. But when I look at and I ask someone, what does the medical field do? One of my big things is mental health parity, where we're having to compare our services to medical and surgical services to make sure funders aren't treating us differently. I'll ask clinicians like, okay, well, how would you treat this if you were in a medical model? Like if you were having to say PT or OT applications of knee rehabilitation after a surgery, how does the medical community need to evaluate that and determine payment and authorization of services? That's how we should be doing our services. So I don't think it's a square peg round hole. I think we need to shave down the sides of our square so we can fit it into that round hole.
Kristen.
I think that's fair. I think I say square peg round hole is because we have adopted like practice and billing to meet the medical model, but we haven't adjusted our training. So if we...
Yeah, I agree with that, Kristen.
So like we should be doing residency, right? Like you shouldn't have 2,000 hours with one 3-year-old and one supervisor, like, right? Like when you're in medical school, like you are hopefully spending some time in pediatrics, but also the emergency room and also with, oncology, like you're expanding your scope so you can do things well. And I don't think as behavior analysts, we don't. I mean, speech language pathology, if you look at very, similar, clientele and practicum and things that like you cannot just do one client like that you just can't. Like you need to have multiple experiences across multiple folks and things like that. And so if we're going to adopt one part of it, which would be the billing and documentation, then I think we should also adopt the training piece, because I don't disagree with you at all, Taylor. Like I do think there's huge breakdowns in the coursework and the supervision piece that has happened, that we do have just copies of copies. And then to go back to what Steve said, people are reading the articles, but they don't really know how to apply them. Like we're doing the thing is to go through the motion to sit for the exam to get these magic initials that come after our name, but not really having all the analytic part that comes behind it. So we don't do risk analyses, and we're not understanding how to, do treatment hours and things like that. Like it's a whole chain of events that's problematic, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, well then I rescind my disagreement statement, Kristen. I don't disagree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
I'll also say, when you use the U of M example, who they take in, who they work with, and who they try to help, I think, is a lot different than your community hospital, who's turning people away because of the conditions or because of the payment methods and different things like that. A learning hospital will take on people and help you find funding in ways that, a lot of the smaller hospitals or the others that are run just by CEOs who are trying to get their pay cut at the end, or they're not pay cut, but their pay at the end of the day based on the profits and that sort of thing. Whereas the university still runs as a university, as a teaching house, but they still have to be able to stay afloat as well. And so I think there's a difference here, where if we are running more like a U of M, where it was, how do we help people and how do we make this work for us too, rather than it being, this isn't working, or I have to figure out how to get paid for this regardless of how well it's helping this person. It'd be a little bit better of a model.
Yeah, it's a good point. Even just thinking of multiple exemplar training and response generalization, stimulus generalization, like, all those concepts of, like what Kristen said, working with like one client for 2,000 hours. You're not responding to the little nuances of, different demographics and different people and the folks you're working with. It's an interesting It's interesting. I usually think medical model, and my mind goes to bad, but it's not bad. It's
No,
yeah.
it's more about trying to get paid and jumping through the hoops to get paid rather than the quality of care to get paid is really what I was getting at with that.
Yeah. But I'm thinking even from the training aspect, though, which is something I don't think about when I think about medical model. And maybe I didn't explain that well enough, but yeah. Anyway, anything else on that? We're flying through these. I thought we were going to end spicy, but we ended it spicy last time, but we all amicably agreed at the end there, I think. Philosophic doubt. So skepticism. This is the last one. What beliefs about ABA practices should our field be questioning right now? Kind of ended on a spicy one.
This is definitely Kristen's turn.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Go ahead, Kristen.
Thanks, Steve. Oh boy, I might get myself canceled today as I keep warning Kyle. I do think as a field, we need to be very cognizant about the terminology we are using and weaponizing it. And assuming that if you're not doing it, you're somehow, old school and terrible. And I am speaking specifically about assent and what does assent mean. And assent is not allowing kids swinging from the chandelier because they demanded for it.
Sure.
That's all I'll say for my opening.
It's a good point. Go ahead, Taylor.
Hopefully also this doesn't get me canceled. And I think, and maybe I'll preface it by saying, under the current models and the current way service delivery is structured, the things we should be questioning are whether or not every child diagnosed with autism can benefit from ABA therapy. I really think that there needs to be an evaluation done, at least in it at the outset of treatment or the outset of therapy, to say, is this child able to make meaningful progress with what we are doing? Or am I just keeping them here because they have no other place to go, or because it's a good funding source, or their insurance pays out the most? And we really need to, and again, I think this ties back to all of our Dear PP examples, but I think really looking at, are we doing best for the field, the best for this individual child, the best for children diagnosed with autism?
Good, Steve.
I think we should question everything at all times. I will always go back to one of my favorite quotes, and it's not even, we don't even know if it's a real quote or not, because nobody knows if Socrates actually existed other than the fact that Plato wrote about him. But the only true knowledge is to know you know nothing. Everything we know now, everything that science tells us could be disproven at some point. So question everything. Stop just relying on what the experts say. Read the research. And then if it still says this is the best way to go about something, then do that until something better comes along. Because if we're not questioning things, then we're just getting in ruts and doing the same thing and not getting any better.
And with that attitude, I think we kind of questioned two things there with Kristen and Taylor. I want to talk about the assent piece too. It is, I do like the research coming out about assent and how to use assent in assent-based practice. I do agree, though, that there is that, like, there are some non-negotiables, right? Like there is that point, and I think I'm hearing that a little bit. Are you not hearing that as often, like in the assent talks, like as far as like?
I'm hearing folks erroneously use it, and like I said, weaponize it. So like we're assent based. Like, well, tell me what that means to you. And I don't think the opposite of assent is like Lovassian 1980s, like forcing you to sit in a chair and using punishment. Like there's a lot of things in between. And I think we are doing a disservice if we are not at some point, we're teaching like persistence and like think about, I have kids who are elementary and middle school age, and like sometimes homework is hard and they don't like it. But like as a result of persisting and help, like I'm not going to just leave you on your own. Like I'm going to help you with your math, or we'll get dad to help with math. But like I'm not going to leave you on an island and say it sucks to be you, just go do it. I'm still going to support you through it. But there, I think, is real value of learning toleration and persistence as like a life skill. And if we just completely avoid that at all costs, like any level of discomfort, like I don't think that is really what assent is and the true meaning. But I also think it's a disservice. Like, no one likes waiting in line in the grocery store. Like, no, I mean, I don't know anyone who thinks that's awesome sauce, but like, it's a skill. Like, we all need to be able to do it. And like, me helping you have some coping skills of like, how can we make the wait in line a little more enjoyable? We can pick up a magazine off the rack and like glance through it while we're having this person in front of us, like price check 17 things. Like, we can help you be less annoyed, but you still have to wait. Like, that's where I see that folks are like, well, we're assent based. Like, that's great. And like, I love that for you. And like, therapy should be fun, but there is also, I think, some value in like having lots of learning opportunities and being okay to wait and do things that are not my most favorite thing all day, every day.
Yeah, gentle teaching and gentle parenting can reinforce some really inappropriate behavior. And so if we're
And that's what
not
I was
taking-
going to say is I see sometimes those two terms being used simultaneously. And I think that's a lot of the error. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, I mean, yeah, gentle teaching is a thing that's swept through Michigan, where everybody should be going around giving hugs when someone is, attacking people to help them feel loved and cared for. And we know that it's directly reinforcing the problematic behavior. And so I think assent, because of where our field was at times in the past, it's very dangerous not to take that in a very careful account. But also, if society is saying this, and think about who we work with, a judge is saying, nope, you have to get these services whether you want them or not. You had to follow this behavior plan. Then, maybe in 50 years we'll be looked at as monsters too. But we're helping people reassimilate back into society because of how dangerous their behavior is. Then it's hard to really say, who's right or wrong in that situation. But if you're just talking about someone who's got some quirkiness, they're like, nope, we don't want you to seem weird anymore, we're forcing you into this, then obviously I think a lot of us would say that's not right, even though 50 years ago we may not have been, but that's just what society said you did. And so,
yeah. Any other takes before we found out we ended kind of kindly there compared to the last time? You guys feel good about it?
I can fight Steve for fun. I mean, I don't
know. We'll save that for episode 5. Well, cool. Thanks for walking through the philosophical underpinnings of science and relating that into kind of today's ABA and the future of our field. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Behavior Business Roundtable.
See ya.
Bye.